Court has ordered the trial judge in the case, Tanya Chutkan, to hear testimony in the case from a very long list of potential witnesses to clarify if some of the remaining charges in the indictment might now fit into a new category created by the Supreme Court today, granting criminal immunity for some presidential conduct. That could lead Judge Chutkan to, in effect, be presiding over an examination of the evidence similar to or equal to what would occur in the prosecution in the trial, the actual trial of this case, when Prosecutor Jack Smith would be calling his prosecution witnesses to the witness stand in Judge Chutkan's courtroom, including Mike Pence, to take an oath and testify under oath to prove to the judge that the conduct described in the rest of the indictment is in no way immune from prosecution, even with the Supreme Court's new definition today. Unlike a trial, Donald Trump does not have to be present for that hearing, which could last weeks, so it would in no way interfere with his presidential campaign. The 6-3 decision identified two different fears on each side of that decision in the Supreme Court. The majority of the justices seem to fear a president living under the pressure of unreasonable criminal prosecutions, even though that has never happened in the history of the country. And the minority of the justices fear a president they now see as, in effect, sanctioned to break the law. The majority called the minority's view, quote, fear-mongering on the basis of extreme hypotheticals about a future where the president feels empowered to violate federal criminal law. What the majority saw without today's ruling, this is what they fear, is, quote, the more likely prospect of an executive branch that cannibalizes itself with each successive president free to prosecute his predecessors, yet unable to boldly and fearlessly carry out his duties for fear that he may be next. Never mind that no president has ever, in any sense, prosecuted his predecessor. Has never happened. The majority of the court fears what has never happened, and the minority of the court fears what they have already seen happen in the Trump presidency. The Amy Coney Barrett, who joined the majority in the case, disagreed with the majority on one point, and that is the excluding any kind of evidence that involves an official act by the president. She raised the question of how that would destroy bribery prosecutions. She said this: excluding from trial any mention of the official act connected to the bribe would hamstring the prosecution to make sense of charges alleging a quid pro quo. The jury must be allowed to hear about both the quid and the quo. The presidential campaign is now the campaign of a former president who abused his power as president against the current president who has not abused that power and does not want any more power. Here is what President Biden said tonight about the Supreme Court opinion.
Good evening. The presidency is the most powerful office in the world. It's an office that not only tests your judgment, perhaps even more importantly, it's an office that tests your character. Because you not only face moments when you need the courage to exercise the full power of the presidency, you also face moments where you need the wisdom to respect the limits of the power of the office of the presidency. This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. With today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that fundamentally changed. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone. This decision today has continued the court's attack in recent years on a wide range of long-established legal principles in our nation, from gutting voting rights and civil rights, to taking away a woman's right to choose, to today's decision that undermines the rule of law of this nation. Nearly 4 years ago, my predecessor sent a violent mob to the U.S. Capitol to stop the peaceful transfer of power. We all saw it with our own eyes. We sat there and watched it happen that day. Attack on the police, the ransacking of the Capitol, a mob literally hunting down the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, gallows erected to hang the Vice President, Mike Pence. I think it's fair to say it's one of the darkest days in the history of America. Now the man who sent that mob to the U.S. Capitol is facing potential criminal conviction for what happened that day. And the American people deserve to have an answer in the courts before the upcoming election. The public has a right to know the answer about what happened on January 6th before they are asked to vote again this year. Now, because of today's decision, that is highly, highly unlikely. It's a terrible disservice to the people of this nation. So now the American people will have to do what the courts should have been willing to do, but will not. The American people have to render a judgment about Donald Trump's behavior. The American people must decide whether Donald Trump's assault on our democracy on January 6th makes him unfit for public office in the highest office in the land. The American people must decide if Trump's embrace of violence to preserve his power is acceptable. Perhaps most importantly, the American people must decide if they want to entrust the president once again, the presidency, to Donald Trump, now knowing he'll be even more emboldened to do whatever he pleases whenever he wants to do it. You know, at the outset of our nation, it was the character of George Washington, our first president, to define the presidency. He believed power was limited, not absolute, and that power always resides with the people, always. Now, over 200 years later, with today's Supreme Court decision, once again, it will depend on the character of the men and women who hold that presidency that are going to define the limits of the power of the presidency, because the law will no longer do it. I know I will respect the limits of the presidential powers I have for 3.5 years, but any president, including Donald Trump, will now be free to ignore the law. I concur with Justice Sotomayor's dissent today. Here's what she said. She said, in every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. End of quote. So should the American people dissent. I dissent. May God bless you all, and may God help preserve our democracy. Thank you. And may God protect our troops.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Professor Lawrence Tribe, who has taught constitutional law at Harvard Law School for 5 decades. Professor, it's the summer break at law schools, but I'm imagining students returning to constitutional law class in the next semester. And what just happened to constitutional law?
Well, it was rocked to its very basis. The Supreme Court of the United States turned the Constitution upside down in a very profound sense. The most fundamental principle on which the Constitution rests is that the law binds everyone, and the Constitution elaborates the structure of that law. Although it does contain some provisions in the so-called speech and debate clause for immunizing senators and members of the House in certain limited circumstances, it doesn't give any immunity from ordinary criminal law to the president, the most powerful figure in our government. On the contrary, it is because he has such enormous power that he, like anyone else, must obey the criminal law. there are some people, including people at the Justice Department, who've written rules saying that you have to wait until the president leaves office before commencing a prosecution for crimes he commits while he's in office. But until today, no one has seriously claimed that absolute immunity for certain official acts would apply to the president. As Justice Jackson pointed out in a very powerful dissent, she dissented in addition to Justice Sotomayor. Justice Kagan joined the dissents. But Justice Jackson, in a very powerful dissent, said this whole business of drawing a line between official acts and unofficial acts, and saying that if you're on the official side of the line, the president can essentially get away with murder. It's on the unofficial side that he might be prosecuted. She points out how that gets it upside down. It is exactly when the president is using the official powers that belong uniquely to that office that we should be most worried about the president becoming an autocrat, or as Donald Trump told us he wants to be on day one, a dictator. So the court has it backwards. It is true that the case will go back to Judge Chutkan. She'll hold hearings. Some think that's kind of a silver lining because those hearings can begin soon, and the nation can perhaps see much sooner than it otherwise would if there had been a trial in the fall. The nation can see more of the evidence about what Donald Trump did in the fake elector scheme and in the violent mob that he riled up. But that's a pale substitute for what the people are entitled to, and that is a verdict, guilty or not guilty. Is the president guilty of, for the first time in our history, organizing an effort to prevent the peaceful transfer of power to his successor? That we won't have. People will be going to their voting booths and deciding whether to vote for someone who has already abused these powers, as opposed to someone who, though the powers have been handed to him, says, I don't want to use them. I believe in the rule of law. Voters will be making that choice without the evidence they need.
I want to read Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's the conclusion of her opinion. She says the majority of my colleagues seem to have put their trust in our court's ability to prevent presidents from becoming kings through case-by-case application of the indeterminate standards of their new presidential accountability paradigm. I fear that they are wrong, but for all of our sakes, I hope that they are right. In the meantime, because the risks and power the court has now assumed are intolerable, unwarranted, and plainly antithetical to bedrock constitutional norms, I dissent. Dissent language doesn't get stronger than that.
Well, the language couldn't get stronger because it deserves to be enormously strong. That language was uttered just 3 days before Independence Day. In several days, we will celebrate the nation's survival of a revolution against kings and queens. We had a revolution so that we wouldn't have a king. And now the Supreme Court says, that's what we're giving you. I don't think we should accept that present, but it seems to me that all that does is basically put the court on the ballot this November. We have to decide whether we want the kind of government that Donald Trump has helped us have by appointing 3 members to this court, because 3 of the members of the majority were appointed by him, and 2 members of the majority ought to have recused themselves, Alito and Thomas. Mm-hmm. That's 5 justices. And it's those 5 who ultimately decided that even the evidence of official acts couldn't be used to show what the president was up to when he used his official powers. Because motive supposedly doesn't matter, but motive is everything. Whether a president gave a pardon in return for a bribe depends on whether he was doing it as a corrupt matter or whether he was giving a pardon because he thought someone deserved mercy. As Justice Barrett pointed out, you can't really make sense of the quid without the quo, and yet under the incoherent decision of the majority, you can prove the transfer of money, but you can't prove anything about the pardon that was given in exchange. That's the kind of thing that makes this decision so incoherent. And what makes it really dangerous is that even if we eventually get over Trumpism and the MAGA movement, we will have to rely on the good character of future presidents because the law will no longer serve as a source of inhibition. That's dangerous. That's a prescription for autocracy and eventually for authoritarianism and dictatorship.
Harvard Law Professor Lawrence Tribe, thank you very much for starting off our discussions on this historic night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence.
And coming up, Neil Katyal, Andrew Weissman, and Melissa Murray will join us with their view of today's Supreme Court ruling.
Introducing Ned's plaque psoriasis.
Ned, what are you wearing?
He thinks his flaky red patches are all people see.
Otezla is the #1 prescribed pill to treat plaque psoriasis.
Ned?
Otezla can help you get clearer skin and reduce itching and flaking, with no routine blood tests required. Doctors have been prescribing Otezla for nearly a decade. Otezla is also approved to treat psoriatic arthritis. Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Serious allergic reactions can happen. Otezla may cause severe diarrhea, nausea, or vomiting. Some people taking Otezla had depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss. Upper respiratory tract infection and headache may occur.
With clear skin, movie night is a groovy night. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla.
What if? What if? What if dreams came true? What if America's greatest basketball players were all stacked on one team? This summer, the dream comes true at the Paris Olympics.
Closer to the Gaza border. A story of resilience and hope. Please take care of yourself and each other.
If you're watching CNBC, it's because you want to get an edge, you want to get ahead. It's our job to deliver that. My ambition is just to be the best that we can possibly be. More often than not, I kind of forget that the cameras are there, but when there's really a burning question, I'm thinking about what my mom would want to hear. I've been thinking about some of the investors I know who are watching. Those are the same questions we have. People always ask me what I want to do next, and I always think they're a little crazy. This is what I want to do. It's the best job you could possibly have.
We often are scared of the reaction to new ideas. And so very quickly we're looking at the data and it feels like it's negative, but really what it is it's just different to what people are used to.
Absolutely, and ask the right question. I give you an example. I work on shower gel. If you test new smells, vanilla will always win. If you ask people what do you want to be, to buy, they will tell you vanilla, they will tell you aloe vera. You change the question. And you tell them tomorrow, if you go to a store, you see all those smells. Which one do you want to smell? Which one will you grab and smell? And then vanilla goes to the bottom of the list. Because suddenly the new news, the newness is something that is very attractive. Yes. While if you ask about purchase, people will go to their comfort zone and they will grab what they want. So ask the right question.
Are
Ariana Madix, will you host Peacock's Love Island USA? Yes!
A hot new bombshell is headed to the villa, where new islanders are sure to make waves.
Who's ready to couple up?
Love Island USA, streaming now.
Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we are coming on the air tonight with new developments. Let's talk about the implications on women's health and then the political fallout. Start with what this law actually will and won't do. Cruise officials will do almost anything they can to get it back open ASAP. So how S is the P? In other words, how soon will it be open?
I could keep talking till the Eiffel Tower starts sparkling.
Now you've laid down the gauntlet, so we have to continue to speak until it starts to sparkle. It's sparkling. It's happening.
I grew up doing rodeo and gymnastics. I'm probably the only country boy that's made it to the Olympics for gymnastics. My ambition as an athlete is to be the best that I can be. When you're competitive, that breeds greatness. Gymnastics is judged based off of how perfect you are, with perfect pointed toes, straight knees, straight elbows. That, I think, is a good motivator and goal to try to achieve perfection when it's so hard.
The Olympics from Paris starts July 26th on NBC and Peacock.
Democracy is egalitarian, which means it's for everyone. But it also, I think, is a divinely inspired gift of our forefathers to show us that we can lead ourselves.
Joining our discussion now, Neil Katyal, former acting U.S. Solicitor General, who has argued over 50 cases before the United States Supreme Court. He's professor at Georgetown Law and host of the podcast Courtside with Neil Katyal. Also joining us, Andrew Weissman, former FBI General Counsel and former Chief of the Criminal Division in the Eastern District of New York. And Melissa Murray is joining us. She is also an NYU law professor, as is Andrew. They are the co-authors of the New York Times best-selling book, Which I Used Tonight, The Trump Indictments, the Historic Charging Documents with Commentary. All three, of course, are MSNBC legal analysts. Neil Katyal, with all of your Supreme Court experience, how much of this did you expect?
Almost none of it. This is a decision that was, I think, wrong start to finish. One that really, I think, changed our Constitution dramatically. So both procedurally and substantively, I'm frankly shocked. Substantively, the idea that a president can do whatever he wants, including and up to sending out Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his political rival, is certainly not the Constitution that I've ever understood. It's not the Constitution of the United States. This court's decision goes way, way, way too far in giving the president basically carte blanche when it comes to executive powers. There are some bright lines and bright silver linings in there about, for example, the president's role over state legislatures and assembly of fake delegates, which I think that the court leaves possible to prosecute people like Donald Trump for. But in general, when it comes to presidential powers, this is not the Constitution that I have ever understood it to be. Procedurally, I would have expected a unanimous decision or close to unanimous. That's the way the court traditionally operates in hot button cases like this. If you go back to, for example, the Nixon tapes case, which was, almost unanimous against Nixon and rejecting his claims of presidential privilege, which was just a weak cousin of what Donald Trump sought here. Even Nixon's own appointees to the Supreme Court ruled against him. Here, by contrast, you have the 6 Republican appointed justices, all siding with the Republican nominee for the presidency, Donald Trump, and you have the 3 democratically appointed ones siding the other way. That is not the place the court should be. It's not surprising that we've already heard from President Biden about this, and I expect in the days and weeks to come, the court will become the front and centerpiece of the election. I think Biden will run against the court more than he'll run against even Donald Trump, although the two now are locked kind of at the hip, Trump and the Supreme Court. So this is a tremendously unfortunate ruling, Lawrence, and one as to which I was shocked.
Yeah, I think so many of us during our lifetimes have come to expect so much of the court because we saw the court deliver in circumstances that proved the court's integrity. The Republican President Richard Nixon proved the Supreme Court's integrity And now former Republican President Donald Trump has disproved it. Andrew, without that Supreme Court decision in the Nixon case, we wouldn't be sitting here so stunned tonight as we are.
We talked about off air, in many ways, this decision sort of quietly reverses the entire logic of the Nixon tapes case, because you have this broad recognition by the Supreme Court, anything that is within a very expansive view of the core functions or the take care clause of the Constitution is completely and 100% absolutely immune. And then even other official acts, there's a strong presumption where the court sets out a very difficult test to allow the government to go forward. But let me just make sure people understand, with respect to that core function where the court says it is absolutely immune, they say one of the things within that core function is the communications and the directions of the president and the Department of Justice. So they say that when a president orders sham prosecutions, he can do that and not face any criminal repercussions. Just to say it is to be shocked by it. I am completely with Neil. This is such a transformational decision. And finally, the tape that you played of President Biden is so remarkable, because you have the sitting president saying, "I do not want that power. I should not have that power. That is not how our system works." The sitting president is saying this is not part of the checks and balances that we have in this country. We are not an autocracy. It is remarkable, just as an institutional and historical matter, that you have President Biden on the day of the decision saying, "I do not need and I should not have that power."
Melissa Murray, you clerked for Sonia Sotomayor. She made the point in her dissent that every president prior to Donald Trump, every one of them assumed that criminal law applied to them, every one of them. They were not inhibited in any way as presidents, as law-abiding people are not inhibited by the fact that law applies to them. How do you think Justice Sotomayor has been dealing with this opinion and the length of time it took to get it out? What was going on? What can you imagine going on inside the court to take this long?
Well, Lawrence, I don't think we have to imagine it. I think she told us a few weeks ago when she received the Radcliffe Medal in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where she said that there are days where she goes back to her office and she cries because this court, of which she is a member, has done something so shocking, so beyond the pale, that it beggars belief. And I think this is one of those days. She chose to read her dissent from the bench. Again, that is an unusual step that they take only when they feel that it's really necessary to impress upon the public how monumental the majority's views are. She also, I think, quite rightly noted that this is a major hit to democracy. And she noted that she did not respectfully dissent. She simply dissented, noting the bad and sad times for democracy ahead. I wasn't entirely shocked by this decision. This is a Supreme Court that has had a 6-3 conservative supermajority for about 4 years. And in 3 of those 4 years, it has overruled a major precedent every single year. Dobbs in 2022, the affirmative action cases in 2023, the Chevron case this year. And now it's essentially abandoned Nixon versus United States. It's not done so explicitly, but this is a sub rosa overruling of Nixon. Who would have ever thought that we would be in a position like this, where the Supreme Court of the United States, so emboldened by its mere numbers, could simply run roughshod over the rule of law, over stare decisis, over existing precedents? That's what Donald Trump put in place. And I agree with Neil. I am surprised the Biden administration has not taken a more strident view about this court and its role in constructing the current landscape that we live in. But this is not just about the threat that Donald Trump poses to democracy. This court by itself is an existential threat to democracy.
Let's
Lawrence,
all just go ahead, Neil, quickly. We'll go to a break after that.
If I could just pick up on that.
Please do.
I mean, you know, the most important book in constitutional law is Alexander Bickel's book, Least Dangerous Branch. And the argument of the book is that the court does its best by not doing a lot at any one time. It conserves its legitimacy. And what you have here is the opposite, what Melissa elsewhere has called the YOLO court, which they're overruling precedent after precedent after precedent because they have the numbers. And what Bickel predicts is the institutional collapse of the Supreme Court and its legitimacy. And unfortunately, that's what we're now seeing. And it's the court's fault. They're putting themselves in the headlights of all of these major decisions like the ones Melissa mentions.
This opinion does read like a mess, and the question is, how big are the holes in it, and how much can Judge Chutkan get through those holes? We'll take up that question after this break.
This has changed our relationship completely.
You need to figure it out or you're both gone.
Don't drop the anchor.
Disaster.
Step in the arena. We ain't come to play.
Everything that you think there's no way to top it, this season tops it.
I put my life on the line. I go all in every time.
I genuinely never know what was going to happen next.
You claim that you're ready. We gonna see when it's on. You claim that you're ready. We gonna see when it's done. Yeah, you claim that you're ready. This was over before it begun.
Sophia could not watch. How are you gonna judge this?
I don't know. It's horrific.
We've never seen anything like this before.
The youngest ever on that stage.
Yeah, I got something to prove, and I ain't got nothing to lose.
I'm sorry, I can't give you a yes. I've got to give you one of these.
Something to prove, nothing to lose.
America's Got Talent, Tuesday on NBC and Peacock.
Ninjas in session. Time to get to work.
We're gonna have so much fun.
She did it!
I have a fire in my belly.
Hitting the buzzer, that would be like winning gold.
What a battle! Got it!
I didn't know anything could feel this good.
American Ninja Warrior, Monday on NBC and Peacock.
The paper towel will absorb the acid.
That's crazy.
Green tea to calm acne. This is my favorite tip of the day.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Oh, that's genius. You just saved me $40.
Lester Holt, America's most trusted TV news anchor.
Ali and Anna seemed so perfect. And what people didn't know was she was screaming for help.
Ali's a rising star on TikTok and becomes obsessed with fame.
And that's when things hit the fan.
This marriage's not healthy anymore.
Ali was holding Anna hostage.
I threw my whole life away for her. You're my woman! You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
More Americans turn to NBC News than any other news organization.
I can't imagine doing a race like this with somebody else.
$500,000. That would change everything.
We're cold, we're wet, and we have no food.
I'm gonna keep going until I can.
We can think faster, we can move faster.
I can't jump there.
Are you okay?
What we care about is the end crate and getting $500,000.
Race to Survive New Zealand. New episodes Mondays at 11 on USA.
The password is password.
Oh!
This.
Password? Password, Tuesday on NBC and Peacock.
The general election is all but set.
understand the race.
America has not had a rerun of the same two presidential candidates in back-to-back subsequent elections since 1956.
The numbers.
The polling doesn't give us answers. It poses and it clarifies questions.
And the issues.
Does what's happening on foreign policy still impact your support for Biden?
Well, definitely.
You both said #1 issue is the border. Absolutely.
With so much at stake, stay with MSNBC.
One of the things I like about what I get to do is that each day is pretty unique. I might wake up and find out there's a brand new poll out, and I want to dive into it and get something on air about that poll. Or I might find out that there's not a lot of new numbers in the world today, and so today's going to be a day I'm going to spend researching, learning about a state, about the different counties, about the voter history, about the demographic trends, and just committing that all to memory. The only way to really be prepared is to get it all in my brain ahead of time.
And we're back with Melissa Murray, Neil Katyal, and Andrew Weissman. And Andrew, I wanted to read a part of the oral argument in this case, in which Justice Roberts appeared to disagree with his opinion today and agree with Justice Barrett's dissent from this element of it involving the so-called official act. During the argument, Justice Roberts said, if you expunge the official part from the indictment, how do you, that's like a one-legged stool, right? Giving somebody money isn't bribery unless you get something in exchange. And if what you get in exchange is to become the ambassador to a particular country, that is official. The appointment, it's within the president's prerogative. And Andrew, today in this opinion, Justice Roberts just seems to have forgotten all of that.
Yeah, so this is going to be quite important, both at the federal level and at the state level, where we have this new brief, or actually this letter to the DA saying that there should be a hearing and evidence can be thrown out, and Trump is trying to sort of relitigate that. Why? Because the Supreme Court in the majority said that if there are official acts that are immune, then none of that can come in as even evidence. And that is something that, as you note, Chief Justice Roberts really took to task the Justice Alito comment, saying that that's Justice Alito's view. And he was like scoffing at that, saying that's going to make it almost impossible to prosecute sort of public corruption cases, because how do you prove the quid to the quo or the quo to the quid? And yet he joins the majority. Now, I should note that Amy Coney Barrett, in her concurrence, dissents on that ground. And she says she would allow that evidence. So you have 4 justices actually on that point saying that it should be allowed. And as I said, that is going to be the argument, that there was official evidence of official acts by the president that came into the state trial in New York. So you can expect that that's what we're going to start hearing about. There are a number of counter arguments that the state will make, including that is an argument that's waived, and that there was de minimis evidence, but that opened the door to that argument. And this is really just a sort of crazy argument. And I really do not know why the Chief Justice flipped on that after being so strong in the oral argument.
Okay, so the Supreme Court is sending this back to Judge Chutkan and basically ordering her to have hearings, evidentiary hearings, where she's going to have to listen to witness testimony. She's going to have to listen to basically the prosecution case. And here is just some. There's an awful lot that the Supreme Court wants her to find out. But here's just some of what they want her to find out about January 6th, for example. Whether the tweets, that speech, and Trump's other communications on January 6th involve official conduct may depend on the content and context of each. Knowing, for instance, what else was said contemporaneous to the excerpted communications, or who was involved in transmitting the electronic communications and in organizing the rally, could be relevant to the classification of each communication. This necessarily fact-bound analysis is best performed initially by the district court. We therefore remand to the district court to determine whether this alleged conduct is official or unofficial. And so, Melissa, that sounds like a full-blown trial just on January 6th alone. And this indictment also includes 42 mentions of Arizona, 48 mentions of Georgia, 39 mentions of Michigan, and so on, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. This is a massive factual undertaking for all of the rest of the indictment, which does sound like a full presentation of the prosecution's case.
Well, it will certainly be an opportunity for a hearing in open court. And Andrew has a terrific op-ed in the New York Times detailing how this could serve as a kind of public adjudication, certainly not a trial by jury, but maybe the best we can hope for given the compressed timeline going into the election. So that could be a silver lining to this. But I will note, the court did the unusual step here of highlighting some of the various allegations in the indictment and providing what it called guidance as to how the lower court might resolve some of these questions. So, for example, with regard to the communications with Mike Pence and former President Trump's entreaties to Mike Pence to overturn the Electoral College votes, the court basically said that those should be considered official actions, presumptively immunized, and then it would be left to the government to meet the very high bar of rebutting that presumption of immunity. So, again, the court has perhaps put a thumb on the scale here by directing how the lower court should receive some of this evidence. And with regard to the point that Andrew just made about the evidentiary issue, I will just note that Justice Alito, who I think an argument could be made should have been recused here, provided the crucial fifth vote for that view that any evidence or actions that were previously immunized because they were official action could not be then used as evidence to prove the crimes that were not subject to immunity. So that would not have been on the table if Justice Alito had not been in the majority and if Justice Thomas had also been forced to recuse.
Neil, Judge Chutkan already took the view that everything in that indictment reads to her like a chargeable crime against a former president of the United States. She is now given the task by the Supreme Court to decide, again, are these chargeable crimes given our new framework to use looking at this indictment? I'm not sure what prevents Judge Chutkan from finding all of it to be a chargeable crime, other than the only item in there that the Supreme Court eliminated, which is just those two, paragraph 74, paragraph 77 of the indictment.
So you're right, Lawrence, that the Supreme Court today said the allegations about Trump pressuring the Justice Department to try and impugn the 2020 election and its integrity, that was somehow an official act and can't be touched by the criminal law. That's a crazy holding, but nonetheless, that's what they've said. With respect to the other allegations, like pressuring Vice President Pence or even pressuring other people, there might be some presumptive immunity, they said, but that is fully within Judge Chutkan's control. And there is this important line in the Chief's opinion, and I expect Jack Smith, the special counsel, to really harp on what the Chief Justice said here. He said, quote, "There may be, however, contexts in which the president, notwithstanding the prominence of his position, speaks in an unofficial capacity, perhaps as a candidate for office or a party leader." And many of the allegations here go to that. Take, for example, the claim that Trump pressured state legislatures to have their fake electors scheme. That is not something that is an official act any day of any week. The U.S. president has no control over state legislatures. It is fully within the states. That's part of our system of federalism. So those allegations in the complaint, I expect Judge Chutkan to find rather easily will survive the decision today. And I expect, as Andrew predicted in his New York Times piece, I suspect that we will see a fair amount of evidence that the American people can listen to and hear about what Donald Trump did when it comes to those kinds of allegations. What they won't be able to hear is more evidence, for sure, on the pressuring Donald Trump did over the Justice Department, because the Supreme Court has now declared that off limits.
All right, we're going to squeeze in one more quick break right here. We'll be right back with Neil, Andrew, and Melissa.
Ariana Madix, will you host Peacock's Love Island USA? Yes! A hot new bombshell is headed to the villa, where new islanders are sure to make waves.
Who's ready to couple up?
Love Island USA, streaming now.
Macy's 4th of July fireworks. Live, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
This is a story about getting away with treachery and coming back stronger.
These people don't disappear, they just go underground.
Rachel Maddow presents Ultra, Season 2 of the chart-topping original podcast. Listen now.
Back with us, Neil Katyal, Andrew Weissman, and Melissa Murray. And I just want to read from page 52 of this book, The Trump Indictments, by Melissa Murray and Andrew Weissman. This is paragraph 74 in the indictment. This will have to be struck from the indictment according to the absolute immunity provision that the court came up with today. It says that afternoon, the defendant, Donald Trump, called the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general and said, among other things, people tell me co-conspirator 4 is great. I should put him in. The defendant also raised multiple false claims of election fraud, which the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general refuted. When the acting attorney general told the defendant that the Justice Department could not and would not change the outcome of the election, the defendant responded, quote, just say that the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and Republican congressmen. And the reason the Supreme Court said that's a completely legal and immunized conversation is because at a certain point in the conversation, Donald Trump was talking about possible hiring and firing and appointment power at the Justice Department, and that justifies everything else that he says in it, no matter how criminal that might sound. That's what this indictment is going to be losing as a result of this. Melissa Murray, there's another paragraph on the other page, another conversation Donald Trump has. But there's a bunch of other conversations right in that section of the indictment that do not involve the president, that involve the deputy attorney general, the acting attorney general, and then the other guy who Donald Trump is thinking of making an attorney general. All of that is happening among them. Does that have to be cut out of this indictment too? The president is not in any of those conversations.
It's a really good question, Lawrence. I actually read that part of the court's decision as sort of a unitary executive theory on steroids. The unitary executive theory, which has been advanced by a number of conservatives, is this idea that the executive branch and the president is the embodiment of the executive branch. So the Department of Justice, for example, the Attorney General, those are all appendages of the president. And so the theory that, as I understand it, and as it's expressed in the opinion, is that in those circumstances where the president is talking to DOJ officials or simply directing things toward the DOJ officials, those are official acts because the president himself is the embodiment of the DOJ. He alone is responsible and directs the DOJ. And so I think that's really significant in this case, not just for what it means for this indictment and what is ruled out as immunized, but also what it means for the special counsel and all of these prosecutions going forward, because essentially the court is saying if the president, if he is reelected, and becomes the president again, if Donald Trump is the president, he can then direct the DOJ to drop these prosecutions, and that direction is
for a home. Realtor.com's Real Choice Financing now gives you more ways to afford a home, like down payment assistance programs in your area.
Don't all apps do that?
Not really. Trust the #1 app real estate professionals trust.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol Turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
At Grainger, we know dealing with the unexpected is part of your job description, and we're here to help with professional-grade supplies, plus same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
We're trying to save the planet with nuggets, because we need the planet, and we also need nuggets. Impossible. We're solving the meat problem with more meat.
Quince. Everyday luxury, clothing, home goods, and jewelry at fair prices. Because quality should never be a luxury. Quince. Get $20 off your first purchase at quince.com.
Want the effects of Viagra, but faster? Meet Rose Sparks. They contain sildenafil and tadalafil, but Sparks dissolve under the tongue. Dissolvables work faster than old school pills. Connect with a medical provider at ro.co/sparks.
I have, over my 30 years, seen many patients who have excessive sweating. I recommend Carpe. It's a game changer.
Carpe is up to 3 times stronger than a regular strength antiperspirant.
Try it today at mycarpe.com with limited time free shipping.
When my doctor gave me Breztri for my COPD, things changed for me. Breztri gave me better breathing, symptom improvement, and reduced flare-ups.
Breztri won't replace a rescue inhaler for sudden breathing problems. It is not for asthma. Tell your doctor if you have a heart condition or high blood pressure before taking it. Don't take Breztri more than prescribed. Breztri may increase your risk of thrush, pneumonia, and osteoporosis. Call your doctor if worsened breathing, chest pain, mouth or tongue swelling, problems urinating, vision changes, or eye pain occur.
Ask your doctor about Breztri.
You got better things to do than clean out clogged gutters. Call Leaf Filter today and never clean out clogged gutters again.
Leaf Filter's technology keeps debris out of your gutters for good. Guaranteed. Call 833-LEAF-FILTER today or visit leaffilter.com.
At U-Haul, we know every family moves at their own pace.
Hi, Mom.
It's starting to snow. That's why we have U-Box. We can store it or ship it.
Thanks, you've been lifesavers.
How and when you want it. Reserve today at uhaul.com.
We need a small business loan fast.
I got this.
Loan Falcon!
There's a better way to get a fast small business loan. Go to OnDeck.com, and if approved, get your funds as soon as the same day. Your loan is on deck.
HomeAglow just cleaned my entire house for $19. No, seriously, $19. They showed up right on time and did my dishes, my laundry, they even cleaned my windows. You just pick a date, pick a cleaner, and enjoy a spotless house for $19. I love using HomeAglow, and I think you will too.
I can feel the winds of change.
DealDash.com. Online auctions since 2009. This PlayStation 5 sold for only 50 cents. This iPad Pro sold for less than $34. And this Nintendo Switch sold for less than $20. Go to DealDash.com and see how much you can save.
That is tonight's last word. The 11th hour with Stephanie Ruhle starts now.
Tonight, the historic Supreme Court decision on Donald Trump's immunity claim. The High Court raising the bar for prosecuting the former president. How it's going to impact the federal election case. Then, what's next after last week's debate? The Biden campaign touting big fundraising numbers while they fend off calls for the president to drop out of the race. As the 11th hour gets underway on this Monday night. Good evening once again. I am Stephanie Ruhle, live from Rockefeller Center, and we are now 127 days away from the election. And today, the Supreme Court gave Donald Trump more legal cover in his election interference case and transformed the power of the United States presidency. In a 6-3 decision, the justices ruled that Trump does have immunity for some of his actions as president in that case. Here's my colleague Laura Jared with the details.
Tonight, a monumental win at the Supreme Court for former President Trump. The conservative majority finding the presumptive GOP nominee must receive sweeping immunity for any official acts taken during his presidency. The 6-3 ruling a defeat for special counsel Jack Smith, with the court bulldozing through the charges against Mr. Trump for his alleged criminal efforts to stay in power, making the completion of any trial before November virtually impossible. Chief Justice John Roberts laying out a new sliding scale of what can be prosecuted, saying a president may not be prosecuted for exercising his core constitutional powers, that he has immunity from prosecution for all his official acts, but that a president has no immunity for private